This episode will include Dick and George talking about the film It's a Wonderful Life, and as a result, we have to tell you some of the plot points in the film. If you have never seen this film, 1946 Frank Capra movie, we urge you to see it, and this spoiler alerts might or might not change your opinion. Forget you heard the show after you've heard it, but it should motivate you to see this film, a classic film. Do enjoy. Today's show is going to be very much one theme, the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which has been on the air on TV for years. But why is it such a classic movie?
One of the reasons it's such a classic film is it's so popular during the holiday season because the film really takes place on Christmas Eve.
Oh, yes.
And the film is based on a short story called The Greatest Gift by Philip van der Stern. And the film, when Capra did the film, was released in December of 1946, 1 week before Christmas and 1 week after Best Years of Our Lives. And Best Years of Our Lives was a film that was the most popular film of that time because it was about returning war veterans.
Oh, yeah, 1946.
And
okay.
so It's a Wonderful Life just didn't do anything. It was a flop.
It got overshadowed by a box office, a blockbuster, as that term hadn't come out yet. But,
right.
Okay.
And then it first appeared on NBC in the mid-1950s, and it was so popular at that time that it became a staple every year during the holiday season.
Well, and as I read, one of the reasons they started showing it was somewhere, I think it was even the 1970s, some copyright on it got not renewed. And so I believe at that point, at least, it entered the public domain as a material that nobody had to pay humongous royalties to broadcast.
Right.
Huh. And you have done this live, haven't you? One of your presentations is on It's a Wonderful Life, is it not?
I've done probably 22 live presentations just on the story of It's a Wonderful Life.
Wow.
I've been focusing in the past primarily on retelling the story or reliving the story as we see it on the screen. But the last two presentations, I focused mostly on the behind-the-scenes stories, more about the actors, the director, and how the film came about and so forth, rather than focusing on telling the story of the film itself.
Yeah, Frank Capra at that time, the 40s, he had won at least a couple of Academy Awards, right?
He was nominated for 5 and won 3 Academy Awards.
But he was a big director. He was big box office.
Very
and yet
popular director.
The movie
In
still
fact,
flopped.
Most of his films are sort of sappy, if you will. They're simple stories like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Mr. Deeds Goes to Down, You Can't Take It With You. And he has a nickname that Hollywood labeled him as Capricorn.
Based on the content of his films.
Right.
Well, still, he was a big league movie director who made a film that in 46 should have been a box office hit, but it wasn't.
That's right. It was all because of the Best Years of Our Lives.
Well, you roll the dice and sometimes you come up with the wrong answer. I
Right.
guess. Well, let's hear a little bit from one of your live presentations in front of a live audience.
But it first appeared on national television in the mid-1950s, and it broadcast on NBC. And because it was such a popular hit, they showing it every year during the holiday season. It's a Wonderful Life is a heartwarming fantasy story. It's one of the most popular films ever produced. And the film opens with angels discussing George Bailey's life. And he's a small-town resident he's not a small-town resident. He resides in a small town called Bedford Falls. And the angels are observing him because it's Christmas Eve. And those of you who have seen the film, you know what he's about to do. about to commit suicide because he has so many financial problems. So the angel summoned Clarence, the angel in training. And it's been 200 years he's been trying to earn his wings. And they tell him that you can finally earn your wings if you stop George Bailey from committing suicide. That's his job. Well, the film follows George Bailey's life in flashback, and it spans over 27 years. And we see time and time and time again George Bailey sacrificing his dreams, his goals, and his ambitions, right, to help friends and family. But George Bailey learns a valuable lesson from his angel in training. He learns, first of all, that he does have a wonderful life, and he learns that one man's life touches others in many ways. And that's a good concept to remember during the holidays and perhaps throughout the year. The film was produced and directed by Frank Capra in 1946. Anybody know what the film is based on? There's a short story that it's based on. Anybody? The Greatest Gift by Philip Van der Stern. Say that real quick. Philip Van der Stern. And the director was Frank Capra. And he's a popular director. He's from Italy, another Paisan. Is there any Italians in the audience? Wow, Paisan. 100%? 50. Okay, that qualifies. Frank Capra had said oftentimes that of all the films he directed, It's a Wonderful Life was his favorite. Now, Frank Capra's film career spanned over 30 years, and he made over 50 films and won 3 Oscars for Best Director. Anybody know what his first film was that he won as director? 1934. You talked about it. It happened one night. Now, that's a major milestone in the Oscars show, is that's the first film that won the Grand Slam. Best Director, Best Actor. Who was the actor in that film? Who said Clark Gable? Clark Gable. Who was the actress? Claudette Colbert. Exactly. That's the Grand Slam. There's only 3 films in the 86-year history of the Academy that won the Grand Slam. Okay, 1971, 41 years later. What was? That's it! I planted her in here. She's the plant. It is. It's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and directed by Milos Forman. And who were the actors? Who was the actress? Louise Fletcher. Louise Fletcher. And then in 1991, it happened the 3rd time. Silence of the Lambs. Scary film, wasn't it? And that starred Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, and directed by Jonathan Demme. But going back to Frank Capra's Oscar, his second Oscar was in 1936. Anybody know the film? It's 1936, 2 years later, his second Oscar. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Gary Cooper and Jean Arthur. And then in 1938 is his final award. You Can't Take It With You, starring James Stewart, Lionel Barrymore, and Jean Arthur. So you start seeing the connection of actors. Well, the film has a magnificent cast, including James Stewart as George Bailey. This was his first film since returning home from the war, which he flew as a bombardier pilot in World War II and flew bombing missions throughout Europe. And he did not want to do this film. Henry Fonda was supposed to get the role, but Capra wanted Stewart for that role. And it took Lionel Barrymore and Frank Capra to convince him to do it because he felt he needed more time to adjust to civilian life.
In this movie, every single frame and dialogue piece leads us to know George Bailey is a loved and wonderful person, but apparently he doesn't know it, and it takes some special intervention.
Well, the intervention is Clarence the Angel in training, who hasn't earned his wings for 200 years. And if he's successful in preventing George from taking his life, he'll finally earn his wings. But what's interesting about his character, we hear Clarence's voice in the opening lines of the film, but he doesn't appear in the flesh until the last 30 minutes, and he's only on the screen for 15 minutes.
Most people have no clue. They think he's in all of the movie.
Just about, yes, just because we're seeing George's life unfold as he takes him back in time and so forth, showing what the world would be like with George not there. But what's interesting is Capra pays tribute to Henry Travers. When George gets his life back, he's running happily through Bedford Falls, and he pauses at the Bedford Falls Theater, and we see the bells of St. Mary's on the Bedford Falls Theater marquee.
Which is a real film.
A real film directed by Leo McCarey and starred Henry Travers, who plays Clarence the Angel.
That is a tip of the hat that's unique. Would people in the era of watching this movie in the 40s that would have been an obvious thing for them?
I think so, because it was a popular film.
Okay.
Another very popular film. But it's those kind of tidbits that could be missed, like the squirrel, like the raven, things like that. Very subtle things, but they're paying tribute to a fellow actor.
Well, and like I was saying, the dialogue is so rich with information that gives you another piece of the puzzle of how the folks that George Bailey has impacted feel about him and what he does. If you don't listen to this movie closely, you're going to miss something that is important in the end.
How many have seen the film, It's a Wonderful Life? Everybody. How many have seen it more than 5 times? How many more than 10 times? Now, I asked this lady earlier in the evening some of the things you're going to learn about. Anybody, if you do know, just nod your head. Snod your head? Did I say snod your head? Just nod your head, because I don't want to ruin it. How many of you know about the squirrel? She does, because she's my wife. My daughter has seen the film 10 times, and I have many people like yourself, and they say, what about the squirrel in the film? There's no squirrel in the film. You're going to find out about that tonight. That's one of the little tidbits.
And then the squirrel, to me, is almost easy to miss, especially if I'm really into the movie again. But now, thanks to your acknowledgement of it, I'm looking for the squirrel, because it's a cute moment. What do you got for me on that?
Well, the squirrel is there to give Uncle Billy comfort after George takes out his anger on him for misplacing the money. What's interesting, when that scene happens, when Uncle Billy puts his head down and is sobbing on the desk, the squirrel crawls up his right arm, and when he reaches the top of his shoulder, he pauses and gives Uncle Billy a hug with his front paws.
Sort of nature saying it's going to be okay, or
Yes.
or the God community, if you will, because we know we're the omniscient viewer.
But what
Just
I
like
find
the
interesting
angels.
is all the people that I've spoken to over the last 5 years, and my daughter, for example, have seen the film 10 times, and she swears has never seen a squirrel or a raven.
I've missed it too over all these years, but no longer. Well, let's play that clip. George is confronting Billy because there's a lot of money missing. And you won't get to see the squirrel, but you'll see what kind of energy George is throwing out there.
And did you put the envelope in your pocket?
Yeah,
All
no, maybe.
Maybe. I don't want any maybe. We've got to find that money.
I'm no good to you.
Uncle Billy, look, do you realize what's going to happen if we don't find it? Listen to me. Do you have any secret hiding place here in the house? Someplace you would hide the money.
I've gone over the whole house, even in rooms that have been locked since I lost the door.
Listen to me. Think.
I can't think anymore, George. I can't think anymore. It hurts.
Where's that money, you silly, stupid old fool? Where's that money? You realize what this means? It means bankruptcy and scandal and prison. That's what it means. One of us is going to jail. Well, it's not going to be me.
Well, in the end, George's Uncle Billy, comes in with a basket full of money that they realize that that's George's demise, is the $8,000 that's been misplaced. And so they go around collecting, and everybody's donating, and then...
Because they love George.
They love George, and this is payback time for George.
Yep, and happy ensues. It's a lovely movie that I have watched now many times because of talking to you about it, and I never get tired of watching it. And I think probably millions of people who this time of year get to see it don't get tired of watching it, which to me says it's a classic.
Well, one of my live audience presentations, there was one woman that said she had seen it every year since it's been on television.
Whoa.
So that's a lot of times.
And she doesn't go anywhere that night when it's on television, with or without, DVR.
I think what it is, she was probably she was an older woman and probably a grandmother, and so I think they're passing this tradition on from generation to generation.
Oh, totally.
Totally, yeah.
Well, I would recommend, if you've never seen It's a Wonderful Life by Frank Capra, with Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed, Henry Travers, the other great actors we've mentioned, you've got to check it out. And it doesn't have to be the holidays.
A great film, popular film, heartwarming film, one that you're going to see again and again and again. You can pick it up at the library. You can watch it on NBC every year during the holiday season.
Oh, they're selling them in many places wherever DVDs are still for sale.
Right. Catch it up on Netflix and watch it during, not during the holiday season.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great title, and it is a wonderful life, according to Frank Capra's story.
You bet.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.